Hi, and welcome to Spieckerman Speaks Retail with me, Carol Spieckerman. I help retail marketers, technology, and solution providers sharpen their market positioning so they can get credit for the great stuff they're already doing and accelerate growth. Through my workshops, advisory services, and thought leadership platforms, we'll bridge the gap between where retail's headed next and how your solutions fit into that future. Here on the podcast, I curate fresh takes on where retail's going next through my latest retail trajectories and interviews with experts who help us chart the course. The retail scene is so dynamic right now that I've been fielding calls from reporters almost on the daily. Everyone from MarketWatch to Morningstar to the Daily Mail, all trying to make sense of what's happening. So I'm launching something new, my retail heat map episodes. Think of these as my real-time radar of where the industry's biggest pressure points are starting to form. I'll be pulling together my recent media contributions, expert panel discussions, and backstage insights to get the real stories behind the headlines and also the lesser-known happenings that are moving the needle in retail right now. I've touched on heat map concepts before, but I'm officially launching it as a recurring format because there's just too much happening right now in retail to capture the action any other way. And you know I'm all about identifying patterns from seemingly unrelated stories. So that's what we're going to be doing today and in our future heat map episodes. Today's heat map reveals a triple threat that's hitting retailers from all sides. And honestly, I'm even surprised by how these seemingly separate challenges are compounding into something much bigger. From workforce disruptions to security spirals to pricing pressures, these aren't just isolated headlines. They're early warning signals of what's reshaping retail as we speak. Let's start with something that perfectly illustrates how external forces are blindsiding even the biggest players. We'll talk about tariffs in a minute. But other stories are largely flying under the radar, like Walmart preemptively firing employees in Florida and Texas because of the Supreme Court's decision to terminate the humanitarian parole program. And this is for nationals of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, otherwise known as CHNV. We're talking about stores losing as many as 40 employees overnight. Walmart doesn't have the luxury of flouting federal law, but scale is what separates Walmart from smaller retailers that could be hit by the same disruption. Walmart's got 4,700 U.S. locations and a multi-format strategy that's a lifeline in situations like this. They can shuffle employees between supercenters, their mainline stores, and neighborhood markets and plug in those gaps. While competitors are scrambling, Walmart's deep management bench means that they can redeploy resources quickly across their entire network. But this is just the latest curveball for Walmart. After navigating inflation and tariffs and economic uncertainty, they've become masters of adaptation. But the impact of the CHNV ruling won't be uniform. Border-adjacent regions will feel this a lot more than stores in the heartland. But let me answer the question I keep getting about what Walmart will let go of as store teams start to shrink. Despite short-term staffing pressures, Walmart won't sacrifice the services that drive customer loyalty. Things like curbside pickup and home delivery, they're not going anywhere because they're too critical to Walmart's customer experience. So the disruption's real, but it's more of a speed bump than a roadblock for a company that's weathered much worse. But for those smaller retailers facing similar workforce challenges without those resources, it'll be a very different story. Speaking of Walmart, reporters continue to revisit retailers' decisions to lock up products behind glass. This is a topic that keeps popping up, then dying down, only to surface again because no one's found a solution. But when I see photos of a Walmart in Oregon where almost everything is locked up, my reaction isn't shock. It's recognition that they've done the math. Walmart doesn't implement any extreme measures without careful consideration. The data confirms that locking products behind glass absolutely decreases sales and even drives shoppers to online competitors. So the fact that Walmart's still doing it tells you that revenue is still offsetting those theft losses, and yes, that there's still no solution to it. But here's what's interesting. Back in November, Walmart started testing a program that lets Walmart Plus members unlock products using their mobile phones. It's an imperfect solution for sure, but it's better than relying on store associates' availability and shopper patience. The beauty of digital loyalty programs, though, is that they can be endlessly modified on the fly. So Walmart can decide how or if to continue to roll this out. But this highlights Walmart's core challenge. Walmart's main advantages are price and convenience. But both of those advantages are neutralized when convenience is compromised. Saving a few cents or even a few bucks won't be worth the hassle for a lot of shoppers. Walmart will need to keep chipping away at these barriers to keep non-members happy while giving members some real perks. But the broader trend here is scary for physical retail. When stores start looking like CVS locations in downtown San Francisco, where the shopping experience is so terrible that sales are plunging, you know you're in a death spiral. The fact is, for all the buzz around AI advancements, technology just hasn't caught up with reality here. And some neighborhoods will be too high risk for normal retail operations. So it remains to be seen whether shoppers will tolerate this new normal in some of these locations. Let's talk about the story that's triggering the tariff watchers. Target employees are reticketing toys at much higher prices and documenting it. When reporters brought this to me, my first instinct was to push back on the assumption this is automatically nefarious. After all, price changes are a constant in retail. And if Target's overstepping or price gouging, they'll feel the pain immediately because shoppers are smart and they do their research. The laws of supply and demand haven't changed. But here's the context that matters. Toys are definitely a tariff-sensitive category, and we're heading into the holidays. So when Walmart publicly announces plans for price increases, it creates a permission structure for Target and other retailers to follow suit. So the question is whether Target can afford to price itself out of the market or trigger additional backlash. And let's be honest, Target's really been going through it lately with its DEI policy reversals and leadership that still seems to be hiding during very troubled times. Target does have some wiggle room here, though, that others don't. Their focus on exclusives across multiple categories, along with even bolder brand partnerships and constant private label upgrades, all of it can mitigate price sensitivity. So it's really no wonder that Target's been doubling down on all three strategies. But they have to know that that doesn't give them license to take things too far on the pricing front. But the real story here isn't just individual price changes. It's that we're seeing the early tremors of tariff impact, and retailers are starting to move preemptively. This is just the beginning. And speaking of, Amazon's decision to extend Prime Day from 2 to 4 days perfectly illustrates how even the biggest players are adapting to economic uncertainty. When MarketWatch asked me about this, I told them it's not just about extending a sale, it's smart strategy for uncertain times and just good business all around. Because Amazon's promise of daily deal drops would be completely meaningless in a 2-day window. 4 days gives Amazon room to actually deliver on that promise and encourage frequent site visits all the way through the program. Everything Amazon's built around Prime Day, from celebrity endorsements to shopping guides and reminder tools, all of that needs time to work. So 2 days was always too rushed. And the timing is a perfect storm because you've got back to school, college prep, and early holiday shopping all converging at the same time. Amazon needs this extra runway to make the most of this multi-occasion moment. But here's what I think's really driving the decision. The reality that we're about to see tariffs hit shoppers' wallets even harder. When Walmart publicly admits that price increases are inevitable, that's Amazon's cue to position itself as the value alternative. Amazon's extending Prime Day to get ahead of potentially dramatic consumer spending shifts. This is a get while the getting's good play, pure and simple. Now, while we're talking about Amazon, CEO Andy Jassy recently claimed that he remains, quote, very bullish about Amazon's grocery business. I've got to call it like I see it. I'm still not seeing the integration between Amazon's various grocery concepts, including what they sell on their marketplace. It all still seems very siloed and completely disconnected. I order a surprising amount of non-perishable food items from Amazon, but I gotta say that finding them is a real chore. So Amazon, I think, could own non-perishable, gourmet, and hard-to-find items. But for now, it's still a treasure hunt that pulls up all kinds of rando results. For a company that's mastered logistics and discovery in just about every other category, Amazon's grocery experience still feels broken. But Amazon appears to be aware of this, and they've launched an initiative they're calling One Grocery. There are lots of facets to it, but the main idea is to integrate Whole Foods into Amazon's overall grocery platform and to back it up with personnel changes that link all of its grocery businesses. In the meantime, though, you can put me in the camp that thinks Whole Foods has gotten worse under Amazon's ownership. I've spent way too much time and money in gorgeous Whole Foods flagship stores, and that's why I know that my local Whole Foods isn't one of those. It's a stamped-out version that threw localization, mouth-watering merchandising, and assortment out the window in the name of scale. There are lots of these types of Whole Foods stores all around the country, but now you're seeing empty shelves, inconsistent availability, bizarre brand presentations where some categories are almost entirely private brands. It feels more scattershot than intentional. So Whole Foods still, to me, feels like a missed opportunity at this point. But it's nice to see that Amazon's trying to turn that around with the integration initiative, with new store layouts, and price reductions. Going back to the tariff conversation, this isn't just happening in the U.S. The ripple effects are borderless. Recently, Loblaws in Canada released an inflation report that noted that thousands of grocery items are being impacted by tariffs, but also made clear that most food categories have non-U.S. alternatives. The highly diversified retailers with agile sourcing capabilities have a lot more room to move than small to mid-sized retailers. It's true in the U.S. and in Canada. But the fact that some Canadian consumers are boycotting U.S.-made products might actually benefit Canadian retailers. The blame for price increases tends to fall on the U.S. government trade policy rather than the retailers carrying the goods. But in the U.S., retailers are taking the brunt of the backlash. But here's where it gets problematic. When retailers like Loblaw report record profits, even as tariffs and inflation dominate headlines, customer trust erodes. And the acceleration of dynamic pricing initiatives in Canada adds another layer of consumer suspicion. You've got Loblaw, Metro, and Sobeys all implementing electronic price tags that allow instantaneous price updates based on supply and demand. On the one hand, this gives retailers a powerful hedge against pricing headwinds and a lot of these unexpected gusts. On the consumer side, though, dynamic pricing can just seem like one more shell game that disproportionately benefits the big guys. But with all these dynamics in play, increased consumer mistrust and potential government intervention are looming large up north. The biggest concern, though, isn't any single tariff. It's the uncertainty, the cycle of levies, reductions, postponements, and category shifts that shows no sign of stopping. There's no way to predict who or what will be impacted at any given time, and not all the consequences result from direct tariffs. For example, the U.S.'s steel and aluminum tariffs will still impact grocery prices because canned goods are in the crosshairs. It's basically a hot mess that shows no sign of cooling down. In the meantime, Hudson's Bay, otherwise known as the Bay, a 355-year-old Canadian retailer, is liquidating. Hudson's Bay was the last traditional full-line department store chain in Canada. The bankruptcy may have been years in the making, and there are lots of layers to it, but the Bay really was a Canadian institution. So there's a lot of sadness seeing it being sold off for parts. Canadian Tire's picking up the Bay's intellectual property, and others are picking over store leases. U.S. department stores have been struggling for years, and the demise of the Bay signals that some just won't have the strength to carry on as so many of these pressures mount. All of these stories connect to bigger themes and to a couple of big questions. First of all, will retail sales remain sluggish through the summer? The May numbers show retail and food service sales down 0.9% from April, despite consumer sentiment supposedly improving. Those aren't horrible numbers, but it does look like some stagnation. The next question is, will holiday take a big hit? We're experiencing what a wise economist recently called a slow slowing of the economy. We're not seeing the impact of policies yet. We're seeing the effects of uncertainty, but that's likely going to change in the fall. Q2 of 2025 is giving us our first taste of how tariffs will reshape retail. We're collecting the dots rather than connecting them. But the full picture will be a lot clearer by Q4, and I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better. When you consider the lag time between tariff announcements, implementation, supply chain lead times, and actual pricing changes, reality really should start hitting then. Amazon's extended Prime Day that we talked about a minute ago is a signal that we're in the calm before the storm, and I expect other retailers to make similar preemptive moves. But right now, we're in a kind of holding pattern where consumers aren't feeling the full impact yet, but they will. The economy's idling as everyone tries to figure out which way the wind's blowing. But when the uncertainty is replaced by actual policy impacts and world events, the cascading effects could be dramatic. Clearly, this will be one of the most challenging holiday planning sessions retailers have ever faced. So, from workforce disruptions to security spirals, from pricing pressures to global trade tensions, these aren't isolated incidents. They're all symptoms of an industry under unprecedented pressure from forces largely out of its control. The retailers that survive and thrive will be the ones with scale, agility, and the courage to make hard decisions very quickly. But what's clear is the second half of 2025 will separate the winners from the casualties. The question isn't whether more disruption's coming, it's whether retailers are prepared for the reality that's about to hit. And as always, I'm curious about your take on timing and the overall situation. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how you think the rest of the year will play out. In the meantime, thank you for listening in today, and I hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you did, you can invite me to your organization or event to bring conversations like this to life in your spaces. This is what I do: B2B coaching, training, and executive consulting. If it has to do with retail thought leadership, B2B market positioning, and business development, it's probably something I can help you with. If you're interested in learning more about how we can work together, reach out to me at Spieckermanretail.com or email team@Spieckermanretail.com to book a discovery call. Until next time, keep speaking retail.